A lot of people are probably wondering why I put Elazers ZvP. Like, why would I do a laser? Of all the people you could put that we're gonna copy for ZvP, what's a laser got to show us? A lot of times people will think, oh, who's the best player right now? Cyril. I'm gonna copy Cyril's builds because surely Cyril's the best person to copy, right? But that's not always the case. I mean, Ravager Ling Bling was the meta for years, but every single Diamond player I'd coach would be like going hard on lurkers. And I don't think that's them being behind the meta or wrong. I think for their skill set, lurkers were just better. And I think there's a lot of situations where the meta will be different at different levels, and it should be. But every now and then, even if it's the smallest thing, if it's a composition, if it's a build order, if it's a certain technique, sometimes a player will do something that will actually just be applicable for most levels. We got replays from the EPT DreamHack type stuff, and what's good about these replays is there's actually a bunch of different stuff going on. There's stargates, there's adept prisms, he even gets hatch blocks. But the thing that's cool about Elazers opener is that no matter what happens, he kind of ends up just doing the same thing. A little bit of the pieces are kind of rearranged just a little bit, but we kind of just get to the same place every single time. And that's the thing that makes it so good. A lot of people will copy these high-level players, and honestly, their shit just falls apart because it's so hard to keep up with the Cyrils, the Lambos, typically even the lasers. But every now and then, you'll find someone who really simplifies the matchup for themselves, for their sake. I don't know what's going on with a laser in ZvP right now, but it's very clear to me that he has simplified this to the bare bones to just make it reproducible. So we have a 20 hatch going down right away. I don't want to understate this enough. So he rallies to his gas in his pool just like a lot of people do now. It's a great way of playing ZvP, ZvT, even ZvZ. Some people do it. And he's just rallying his drones. Fairly normal stuff so far. But he sticks to just 2 drones on gas because he's taking a 20 hatch. Okay? This is a no scout from, or no, actually it's not a no scout. He just killed the probe. I forgot that I literally just saw that. This is a no third block for a laser. So he can just go ahead and take this for free, essentially. And we're just pumping our queens out. Actually, all of these things matter. So let's focus on this. 1 queen immediately in the knot, as soon as it finishes. But for the main, we're waiting a little while. Overlord, like a 25 overlord, and then we get the second queen out. Okay? 2 lings coming out, just to scout around. He's gonna check for proxies. This is not something you have to do. This is just something he has to do. But look at this. Creep tumor right away in the natural. Didn't even inject. And now he's making another queen. Pay attention to this natural hatchery, because it's gonna do a lot of heavy lifting into this opener. Just the queen, and then we got a queen in the main. The Zergling's coming out, and we're just staying safe. Now, with all this, I forget, there's a game where he messes up his speed. I don't think it's this game. I think this speed's on point. We'll see. I'll let you know when it happens. But we're just very carefully, one at a time, making queens out of this natural base. And whenever you look at 20 hatch builds and queen timings, it's gonna look really complicated and really scary, but first we're just gonna like go through the game and then I'll just break down exactly what's happening. It's gonna be overwhelming at first, but then we can just kind of break it down. But just look at like what he's doing with his units. 2 queens at the third, 2 queens on the main, spore, and 1 queen at the net. He is virtually indestructible versus any air right now. If an oracle comes in here, 2 queens. 2 queens are almost as good as having a spore and a queen. Of course, spore and a queen in that, double queen in the third. Of course, if you have your queens leaning on one side, the side that the oracle's coming from, it's way better. So he's kind of leaning them on the downside. This one's on the right a little bit. And we're kind of just situated. You know, you wouldn't have these queens on the left of the hatchery. There's nothing going to come from over there, right? So we're just ready for anything. But we don't actually know what's going on. If we look at his vision, what are we playing versus right now? It's kind of interesting how a lot of Zergs will take different approaches to scouting overlord speed. Maybe they'll get lings in, different stuff like that. A laser ling scouted, but he ling scouted around the map. He actually went to all the corners checking for proxies. He didn't really bother scouting. He only sent one out, and it died in the natural. We don't really see anything, but it doesn't actually matter because we're covering all of our bases. Literally and figuratively, we're covering our bases right now. And this solves a huge problem that lower level players have in ZvP where they're just not quite sure what's going on. And we can reliably make the Roach Warren and cover our bases with queens and be safe versus both. Of course, in this game, it is just Stargate, so we don't have to worry about having a super quick Roach Warren. We're getting the lair and all that stuff. And I believe he just scouted the third base. Yeah, the laser's on top of his stuff. But we didn't have to worry about anything. We can just kind of play like this and just have a super easy way into mid game. Now he does a link timing, and ultimately he goes into a Nidus and the game ends. But he didn't really know what was going on 100% until he saw those oracles. We had different clues, like of course people will know the timing of the warp gate being a little bit later can signify some Stargate because you're making the Stargate before the warp gate. You got to keep in mind Elazers keeping all these things tracked, but for diamond players this is not necessarily a given. This is like an optional thing that sometimes happens. So even though he's doing these at the same time, I think he builds a really good foundation that anybody can do. So let's see this game versus adept prism, because of course he had the queens in position, there was a Stargate, whoop-de-doo. Let's compare it to an actual adept game. So if you see the nat gases, you can see if it's DT then. There's a couple different DT builds. There's the DT build that looks like adept prism, that's 2 gas. And there's the fastest DTs possible, which gets your gases at the net. So if you're seeing with your overlord, like he got warp gate right away, and he's getting his gases super fast at the natural, that's huge red flags for DTs. At the very least, it's Stargate and stuff like that. If you're seeing like a bunch of adepts and it looks like he's gonna do a timing, it could be DTs with 2 gas, but you can pretty easily tell. Well, I shouldn't say easily. You should be able to tell if you're paying attention because they just don't warp in any more adepts. They just have 4 adepts, and it's basically just like a fake attack, like a mock attack that they go forward. So it's like stuff like that. It's just kind of paying attention to little things. But I think DTs are like the least of your problems in this meta, to be honest. That's why I think this build is good, because it's very well rounded for Stargate and Twilight Council timings. And then if you really feel like you're worried about DTs, just put down a spore a little bit later, because you don't need it nearly as fast versus DTs as you do versus oracles. I think that's totally fine. But that's like a 4-minute decision versus like a 3:30. But yeah, that's what I'd say. So I don't know if he does these gas timings perfectly, but I did have him written down, like the average gas timing that he was going for, and I kind of figured out what the optimal gas timings were based off of these. How many replays did I look at? I think maybe like 6 or 8 replays I had of a laser and EPT. There was always a little bit of a difference, but I kind of averaged it out, and I think I did pretty good. So there's little stuff like this. He always checks outside his natural just to see if there's a probe coming, so then he can get a jump on going to the third. That stuff's all good. Good stuff that everyone can do. Again, rallying to the gas. Super, super good in ZvP. Very conventional way to play. Overlord, all that stuff. Nothing we haven't seen before. But this time, I'm going to be focusing exactly at when these queens are coming out and exactly what he's doing with the gases. So, rallying to the gases one by one. Now you'll notice that one's not going to the gas. The first one goes to the gas. The second one is being sent to take a third on 20. And then the third drone is being sent into the gas. There's a very specific timing here. I think this will probably be the hardest part for lower level players, is getting that rhythm down. But now he's not putting his other drones on the gas. He's leaving it at 2. And he actually leaves the gas exactly at 60. Actually did it perfectly that time. There we go. So now we're just sitting on 1 drone on gas. And we're going to be on 1 drone for a little while. Again, getting the 2 lings out, we're shooing the probe away. We're figuring out what's going on. You can do a couple things with this. You could pull out this ling to scout. You could even go into their natural as their adept is coming out, something like that. Or you could do what a laser does and you could scout all the corners of the map. I think this is a little bit more advanced, so I don't really see this as like a 100% necessary. This is kind of like if you've really mastered this kind of opener, you start employing it yourself and you start checking for the corners and stuff like that. A laser's staying on this probe for the sake of safety, making sure he's not getting any proxies or anything like that. He's not going to be blindsided by anything like that. Again, 26 queen right after the overlord, or should be around there. Let's see exactly what he does this game. Queen immediately in the nat. Second one in the main. Overlord. 26 queen. Oh wow, perfect. But we're not going to inject immediately with this queen. We're just going to tomb her. Because we actually have a lot of money going to things that are not larva. We got 2 queens pumping out. We don't need the inject. We much rather get a creep tumor in this situation because we're just pumping queens out of this base non-stop. And that's the key. This base, whatever the second base is, would be the base that non-stop queen productions or produces non-stop queens. Guess it a little better. So it's a really easy way to think of it. It might seem like he's just randomly making queens, but it's actually pretty much just the natural base or whatever the second base is non-stop. And then as soon as this base comes up, we're making a queen right away. So we're kind of setting up the situation. Now we got 100 gas. I believe that's the trigger for the layer. We'll see what he does here. Okay, moving the queens now in the main. We're kind of prepping for Stargate stuff, and then now we have the other queen that was in the natural come up to the third base. So you can see the progression here, and then this queen pops, comes down here. Super nice. We got each base pretty much locked down, and then we just need a spore in the natural if we wanted it to be defended versus oracles and stuff like that. That's how we would do it. Okay, here we go. As soon as he makes speed, as soon as he gets 100 gas for speed, he starts rallying back on gas. That's kind of the trigger. I forgot we didn't have speed. I forget that every time I look at this build because I'm so not used to it. Still getting the spore, still safe versus everything. But this time, we're versus Adept Prism. Actually, not just Adept Prism, we're versus 6-gate Adept Prism. And Xpax is going to go super aggressive. He's kind of going through the motions of taking a base, but this is not going to be a base taken at least anytime soon. But we have Zergling speed in just 30 seconds, which will be just in time for this attack. And we have the Roach Warren in 20 seconds, which will also be just in time for this attack. And actually, queens are really good versus Adept Prism. In a lot of games, you'll see people will go 6 queens just the same versus Adept Prism as they do versus oracles. So we kind of end up with this setup of we're getting our melee, or rather our Zergling speed just in time. Even though it's delayed, it's just in time for this Adept build. And we have the Roach Warren also coming up pretty conservatively, coming up just in time for the Adept Prism attack. And we actually end up with a pretty similar response as we usually see. Going Lings, and then we have the queens that can use it. They could be used as a buffer. They're probably going to be tanking in the front with some roaches, and then they'll have Lings in the back, following shades and whatnot. And it's just a super simple game from there. This is this is bread and butter setup right here. Lings in the back, roaches and queens in the front, and then it just turns into a normal game, and then it goes on like this for a while. So it's actually pretty nice, because even though he didn't actually see anything in the main base, he just saw everything in the natural, and he was accounting for, you know, there was a stalker first, and there was the warp gate started right away, and different things like that. He didn't see any physical buildings at all. He actually just saw this. This is his vision the entire game. And what I'll say for the people who are more, I hate to say just better, but that's kind of what it is when you're really on point with these kinds of games in ZvP, when you're like mastering this style, having Lings like this, checking for prisms or oracles, and checking for thirds is always a good bonus. There's little things like that Elazer does that are just really good, and it's at the end of the day why Elazer is as good as he is. But I'm not going to expect that from a diamond player, or maybe even a masters player. This is kind of like high masters. You're really starting to get into like, okay, I need to be safe versus everything, and scouting every nook and cranny, kind of like scouting for these proxy spots. It's the same idea. I think that's the next level. There's tiers for sure. Okay, so what if they hatch block? I can't take a 20 hatch versus a hatch block. There's just no way. I'm not going to be able to defend both my bases. They're separated, and you know, I'll be torn apart. So what is Elazer's answer to getting hatch block? Of course, we all know this situation. Going straight to the third base. Taking the third base hatch, I think, is always the best choice. Making a pool is no good, but Elazer is unfazed by seeing this probe. He goes straight into his usual rallying, but instead of rallying the second drone to the base, it's just gonna go straight to the gas. All 3 of these drones mining happily, and it's just kind of like a normal game so far. Getting Overlord, everything pretty usual. We can see here getting some scouting done. Now, not 2 Lings, but 4. We are playing pretty safe by the book stuff. And we want 4 Lings instead of 2 just because we don't want a pylon to be in our natural, and then if we can't get that third base down and the adept comes right away, we're going to be in big trouble. So we get the 4 Lings, we shoo the probe away, and Elazer still looking around for proxies. This is a twitch that Elazer just will always do until he dies. I think, again, this is a high level thing that I don't think is 100% necessary, but if you want to push yourself, you're feeling pretty confident about these kinds of openers already, checking for different spots for proxies, or even just patrolling outside their main base to catch an oracle or a prism, I think is just always good. Or even just having a Ling behind the third base just to see exactly what that timing is. I think that's all good. Something important to note is the zerging speed was right away. And not only was it right away, but as soon as he was finished, he pulled off gas. He pulled all 3 drones off gas. And we're not mining for a little while now. And he gets 2 lings in the main. Those are the 2 big things we gotta worry about. 3 lings in the natural base, or 3rd base rather. This could be 4 for you, doesn't really matter. And we got 2 in the main. This kind of covers adept either way. You want to lead with the queen in front and then have the lings follow the shades. That's generally how it goes. If they start getting closer and closer with their adept as the shade is in here, we can close the distance with lings, because the distance between shade and adept won't be as far, and then it's either the shade's on its way out or they're practically in the same place. So you can just kind of always lead with the queen, and then the lings can just kind of defend the mineral line as best as they can. But we're seeing a very similar setup already. 2 queens in the 3rd and another queen coming in the main. And we'll end up with a very similar setup as we have been seeing. Going tumor in the main now. 2 queens here, 2 queens here, and we're good to go. We don't have to worry about any oracle stuff. We don't actually know. Is it oracle? Is it not? I mean, I know Elazer has some inklings to what's been going on just by the gateway units he's been making, warp gate timing, all that stuff. But as far as actually seeing physical buildings, we don't exactly know 100%. And we got the lings patrolling every little bit of space. So we put down the Roach Warren, and actually, let's get that gas timing to the exact point. Was this 3 minutes? That's right. 3 minutes is when he starts rallying guys and gas. So at 3 minutes, we don't pull a bunch of drones. We just start rallying drones as we're making them. He's just kind of making a couple, and as he's doing it, they're just going straight into this gas at the 3 minute mark. And it's very, very casual. No worries here. Making this tumor. I actually forgot how early that was. I had in my head that it was later, but no. 3 minutes on the dot, he'll start rallying over. I think for most people it would be easier if you just rally all 3 at once, but Elazer is very good at this game. So we kind of end up with this similar scenario that we're used to. We have the Roach Warren coming down at 4 minutes. We have 4 queens right now with the 5th queen on the way. I think we're about to get to 6. Yeah. As soon as the space finish, 6th queen on the way. And suddenly we're back to square one. We're ready for just about anything. We have our lings set up and we have all the anti-air we'd ever need. Of course, this game is a prism build, so it ends up just being queens as the buffer while the lings follow shades around, which is just solid, good things to do. But here we are. We got our base blocked. We did a 30 hatch, but we're still kind of in the same place. Following all the adepts, cleaning up the adepts, ling roach queen. This is just solid fundamental. Nothing to see here. And this game goes on for a while, back and forth, but the point isn't how well he does microing versus these adepts, just how he got set up and how, even though he got blocked, we ended up in just about the same place. And the nice thing about this is, just like how in the natural base of the last version, it was just non-stop queen production. For the 3rd base, it's pretty much the same story. It's the 2nd base you make, no matter where it is kind of the star of the show. Of you're just getting a queen, and then we're injecting one, injecting with the new one, or we're tumoring with the 1st queen, and then injecting with the new one, and then we kind of just back to back make queens as much as possible. I'll go over the specifics though, because it is a little bit different. I believe the first extra queens here. Yep. Okay, so first queen at 32 supply, and then we just inject. Double inject. Don't have to worry about a tumor right away. And then as this cycle comes in, we make the tumor. And then the queens start pumping. Fourth queen coming in here. I believe this is the only queen that comes in the main. So I'm trying to think of exactly the best way to think about this queen. A lot of the queens are coming at the third base, but the way to think about this queen is it's specifically made to deal with oracles. So I like to think of it as like, if I'm gonna have a queen in my main base, or two queens in my main base, to be safe versus an oracle, I'd want about a 3-minute queen. So we end up with a 3-minute queen. Actually, this game is a little bit later, 3:10, but you want it around 3 minutes. So it might, this one I think feels the most random, just at a glance, but if you think with the purpose of, okay, I need to have my queens ready by 3:30, that's when the oracle's coming out, this feels a lot more intuitive. Because we don't want to have a queen come from up here and then walk all the way down there. It's way too much space. Going from this base, to this base, or this base to this base is fine. But going 2 whole bases is kind of a lot of pain in the ass. It could get cut. It could just be floating a lot of energy if you're not timing it correctly. So this is kind of like the oracle queen. But then from there, this base will pump at I believe, is it 3:30? Yeah, this is a 3:30 queen. So fourth queen 3, fifth queen 3:30, and then this guy, as soon as this finishes, we're gonna make that hatch. Boom. Or that queen. I keep saying the wrong words. And then we're good. And then this queen that was defending the main base can now go down here because, well, we know, because we saw the prism, that it's not a Stargate. We don't have to worry about that anymore. But, the building blocks are there. Cool. Is that all the queens? The 6th queen? Yeah. So I think this was the weirdest for me in terms of queens, trying to figure out exactly when stuff comes out. But we still have a solid 3 queens coming from this base. And then 2 from here and 1 from there. So the focus is right on the second base, pretty much always. I think that honestly, this build can honestly go all the way to GM. The only reason I say this is a good build for Diamond and Masters is just because I think it's a really consistent way to get into that 4-minute mark. We're seeing trends all around. 4 minutes, we have these 6 queens done, or at least on the way. We have the Lings ready if we need them. We have the Roachborn on the way if we need them. And we're all on 1 gas. It's very consistent along the way. Even if we get our base blocked, like we'll see in this game. This game is an Oracle opener. Getting our base blocked. And then immediately rallying to designated spots. In this game, he is going 3 in gas just because the bases are split up, but no big deal. So I think the biggest difference between having your base blocked and not is the fact that instead of having 4 queens come out of your second base, it's 3, because one of those queens is going in the main to help defend versus the hypothetical oracle. And I think the gas timing is the big mix-up. So if you got one of them down, but you're having a little bit of trouble, that is the place to focus on, because everything else is pretty much the same essence. Even though we have like 4 lings, for example, instead of 2. We're doing very similar things with our lings, kind of scouting around, checking if you can get ling run bys and stuff like that. Defending with the rest, shooing away probes. A lot of the moves he's making is pretty similar in essence, so nothing too much to worry about here. This is a 30 hatch. Let's see. Actually, a little bit later. Oh, excuse me. Not a 30 hatch. Because we actually get, let's see, 32 queen, I believe. Yeah, okay. So with this, we are getting a little bit later of a 3rd hatch. Ooh, I almost missed that. This is why you always go over stuff twice. So because he's getting such a quick 3rd queen, which we do with the 20 hatch as well, but because we're getting speed and a 3rd queen really quickly, we have to delay our hatchery. In the 20 hatch version, we're getting the hatchery really quickly with the 3rd queen, so we're delaying our speed. This is kind of the push and pull of build orders in StarCraft 2. Something's gotta go. And in this case, we don't really want to get rid of our queen timing because we really want this for things like oracles and maybe even like little adept pokes. So we're not going to budge on this. We're going to make our 3rd base a little bit later. That's just the price of having the speed. But at 3 minutes, we should be seeing this. Yeah, right on time. This is the game where he was really on point with his queen timings. The last one, I looked a little bit like a fraud, but 3 minutes, getting that queen timing, 36 seconds to make a queen, so it'll be just in time for any oracle stuff. And of course, this was at the 32 supply. So we're just kind of pumping like that. But we don't have to worry about our main base anymore as far as queens go. We're just going to be making everything out of the 3rd. Besides this 1 queen that's going to come out of this base, just like how with the 20 hatch build, we're making the 1 queen out of the 3rd base. We're gonna make 1 with this too, even though it's a 34 hatch. But still stands that this will be pumping out 3 queens, and this will be the very last one coming out here. And look what we got here: 2 in the main, 2 in the nat, 3rd one being prepped to eventually transfer onto the main and or to the natural, maybe cover some extra space, stuff like that. So we can now have a pair of 2 here and here. Cool stuff. And then we still have the Roach Warren. This is probably a little bit better of example of maybe a laser not knowing 100% what was going on. So he does make the Roach Warren because we got Showtime being sneaky with oracles in the depths. So we're just playing it safe and putting down the Roach Warren, right? If we see an oracle up until 4 minutes, we don't have to worry about putting the Roach Warren down immediately. Of course, you always want to get a Roach Warren. It's a good cornerstone of ZvP, but it's just playing a nice, safe Roach Warren because he's expecting some kind of shenanigans going on. Making the lings as well to be safe. And you'll find a lot of scenarios where maybe it is an oracle opener and you'll make a bunch of lings, but it's actually totally fine to just take these lings and you could defend them or defend your bases with whatever you need to do. But after that, you can go ahead and counterattack and attack the 3rd base, put a bunch of pressure on there, especially if they're being aggressive with their oracles. You can do that pretty well. And just to highlight the defense, you can kind of see how queens can play in this kind of situation. We got the queens running around along chasing the oracles. In this case, actually maybe not the best showcase. And we did get 1 oracle. The laser was a little bit out of position. but the spirit is there. He had everything in the natural. You see that? I think he thought it was an adept prison build, so he was like, "I'm just gonna send all my queens in the nat." It was not. But you can see it, right? There's the building blocks. Now he has the 2 queens in the main now because he realizes, oh shit, this is actually this is not adept prism. But what you normally want to do is you keep 2 queens in each base, until you have a spore basically, and then these queens are kind of freed up. So in this case, there's spores still making, so we have 2 queens. Keep and watch. But our spores finished here. We can just have 1 queen, and spores finished here. We actually have 2 queens, but I think that's more just because we're near creep spread and things like that. But the idea is you're holding your fort down with 6 queens, 2 at each base, and then once you have spores down, you can free up those 3 queens, and then they can be used for stuff like creep spread and stuff like that. It's a very natural progression. Whether you're versus Oracle opener and you need to defend these Oracle pokes, or you're versus Adept Prism and you're using them as a buffer, queens are just really the best thing you can get right now. At least 6 queens, I think, is a really good number. There's definitely an area where queens become less and less effective, but 6 has been pretty nice, I think, for a lot of people these days. But yeah, even though we got all these shenanigans going on, we're just into like a normal macro game now, which you can totally play. Anything else I missed? He rallies into the gas at 3 minutes per usual. I missed that. That's pretty much it. I guess we could talk about these tumors, because okay, yeah, I think this is probably the last thing to highlight, because with the 20 hatch version, it was the tumor right away in the natural, like you just couldn't spend it. Is there anything like that for 30 hatch? The only thing that's similar is when you're building 1 queen on a base, because you can't really transfer to the natural quite yet, we instead just tumor. So as soon as we make this queen, the next cycle go into a tumor. Pretty simple philosophy. And then same with this base. We're making a second queen here. Well, we don't want to float energy. We don't want to double inject. So 1 tumor, 1 inject. Pretty simple way of doing it. Pretty straightforward, I think. And then you're pretty much good to go. And then as far as tumors after that, it's just, do I have all my bases covered? If yes, then go ahead and start tumoring around the map. You're totally free as long as your bases are safe versus any oracles, or if it's versus a Adept Prism, maybe you want to save a couple for transfuse versus the initial timings. But besides that, you're pretty much free to go with these 3 extra queens you got. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it.